Bad Therapy by Abigail Shrier. Caught in the fish tank of insanity. That's my review for the day. I don't often do book reviews of other people. I'm too busy writing my own books. But this one took my attention. And this is how this came to be. Because I was writing how I escaped from the trauma cult, I was doing a little bit of research, like things like all these different abbreviations and acronyms for mental illnesses, ADHD and PTSD, CPTSD, which, ooh, that's, each one of those is a topic for another day. I need to concentrate and focus on what we're doing here. So, yeah, it's doing a little bit of research, and as a result of that, YouTube started delivering me all manner of modern mental health kind of influences. Oh dear, that is also a topic for another day. The trauma grifters. But I came across this interview, and there was this lady on it, and she said the following thing that caught my attention.
A set of researchers out of Australia, and they were looking at the techniques being used in schools, wellness techniques, coping mechanisms for dysregulation, anti-bullying awareness. They had a control group, so it was actually rigorous, of kids who didn't go through these programs. And what they found was the kids that sat around dwelling on their pain, focusing on their emotions, learning coping techniques for dealing with it, which of course forces you to think about bad emotions. Those kids ended up sadder, more anxious, and more alienated from their family.
Yes. And I was like, yes, nada. That is the problem. That is exactly the trauma cult. That's exactly what we're doing. So I thought I'll buy the book, and I did. It was remarkably expensive, a proper hardcover. Haven't had one of those in ages. Even with a dust jacket. Look at that, a dust jacket. Wow. But anyway, so I started to read it. And this book is about children, about what's happening to the children in the modern sort of, well, inside the trauma cult. What is happening to the children inside the trauma cult that is making them worse and worse and worse and worse. And I have had little contact with this because in my family, we don't have anybody from Gen Z. We have Gen X and then Gen Alpha. So I have not had contact with what's been going on with the children other than the general societal thing of looking on TikTok and going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, what is happening here? That which I probably share with everybody who's got some kind of sense and is over the age of 30. So this lady here, as we can see, is much younger than I am, and she has children. She has children and she lives in America, and these children are going to American schools and are immersed not only in the children's trauma culture that is being thrown upon them by every school and every kindergarten and all that, but she is also immersed in the parental part of the trauma culture as a parent. And I think that's possibly where she comes from primarily and where she is making her stand. Right at the beginning of the book, she tells a personal story of going into her son's coming back from a school camp and he has a stomach ache. He's about 8 years old, and the stomach ache's not getting any better, so she's taking him to the local hospital to have him checked out, which is a reasonable thing to be doing. And as she's sitting there with her kid, this guy turns up, this mental health nurse type of person with a clipboard, and essentially asks her to leave the room so he can ask this 8-year-old child with a stomach ache, who's had a stomach ache for now 2 or 3 days, some mental health questions outside of the presence of the parent. and she has 40 fits and demands to see the questions. And these questions are just horrendous. They're horrendous things to be asking a young child that is in pain. You know, do you ever feel that your parents aren't taking care of you properly? Do you ever feel really sad about stuff? And she was very upset by this. And this may well have set her off on the track of researching and writing this book. And while we're on the topic of researching and writing, anybody who stands up and says, psychology really sucks, this trauma obsession is ridiculous, we need to stop what is going on here by teaching children to, just like she said there in the interview, by asking children to sit and focus on negative emotions. Of course they're going to get worse. Of course they are. We can, you know, this is just any thinking human being that hasn't been brainwashed to the nines at psychology university can immediately see that is a stupid idea. This is a terrible idea. They might not know the mechanisms of why that happens, that children who are focusing on their pain and suffering, or any human being who's focusing on their pain and suffering, is going to get worse. They don't know why, they just know it's so. Anybody who has the most tiniest modicum of common sense would realize that this is a terrible idea, unless you want to completely destroy people's mental and emotional health, disempower them completely, and turn them into quivering medication-taking wrecks in their millions. If you want to do that, if you want to achieve that, then you are bang on the right path. Bang on the right path for that. Now, I am a modern energy researcher. In my world, our spirits aren't just a word, they're real. We have real living energy bodies. And when these living energy bodies get stressed, they express themselves through the true sixth sense, through negative emotions. Negative emotions. So every time any of us deliberately and without good reason of any kind starts to focus in on trauma and misery and suffering and grievances and things that make us angry or stressed or depressed, we are literally bringing our energy body down. We're causing it to become stressed. And when that happens, it's not just the negative emotions. It impacts the clarity of our thinking. It impacts the clarity of our focus. And it just makes a person less than they need to be. Any person, any baby, any 2-year-old, any 5-year-old, any 20-year-old, any 6-year-old, any 60-year-old. It's just energy body stress. And our modern world is so up already. There is so much stress on our living energy bodies that then focusing them in on trauma and misery is just a terrible idea. And so, yeah, our young lady here who wrote this book with her children inside the system saw it, saw the light of day. She saw it. She saw how destructive this was. And, well, she went to town on this. She talked to lots of different people, parents, children, youngsters, and identified, as everybody does who dives into this, that mobile phones, of course, are a major additional stress factor. That's not just a straw that breaks the stress camel's back. That's a giant boulder on top of the young people there. That it's just too horrifying. I mean, there's so much to this mobile phone thing. One of the things that terrified me when I read it in the book was that nowadays, even good friends, like two girls who are good friends, and they're texting or phoning each other, they're not actually saying what they're thinking anymore, what they're really feeling anymore, just in case the person that they're talking to or texting with stops being a friend at one point and becomes an enemy. and they've taken screenshots or recordings of what this 12-year-old, 13-year-old has said. Oh my God. I was so freaked out by this. You have just no idea. When I was young, I used to love talking to my female friends, my girlfriends from school. I used to run home from school, pick up the telephone and call them, and we used to talk for hours and hours and hours and hours. That's a part of this talking is a part of girls' development, very much so. This unfettered talking, giving flow to your ideas, and the other person is responding, and it's a back and forth, and you laugh and you have all sorts of ideas. You tell each other all sorts of things and stories that you make up. To put now children in a position where they have to be afraid that any single thing they say will be taken against them as evidence in a court of law 30, 20, 40 years down the road. Oh my God, that freaked me out. I mean, that I felt badly about mobile phones from the get-go and how they disrupt conversations, and I actually even talk about that in my trauma book. And it comes up here too. And this is really something that society needs to address now. They need to take those phones away from the children. It can't be. Abigail says in the book that she wants schools to take them away from the children. That's just the tip of the iceberg. My God, why haven't they? Are they insane? You know, man, I'm a conspiracy realist. Sometimes it really does seem to me as though everything is just planning and plotting and acting together to disempower the people who are living at this time as much as you possibly can, and starting as early as possible with that. It's very difficult sometimes to not think that there is a guiding hand at work that is making this so, because it makes no sense that children are allowed access to mobile phones in schools. That makes no sense at all on any level whatsoever. Why is that happening? I don't know. And of course I digress, or do I? So yeah, the mobile phones. And it's very interesting because throughout bad therapy, Abigail Shrier makes the point that therapy in and of itself is a really bad idea. And she has assembled, or her team have gone out there and really gone to town and assembled evidence that they can use. So when people come and say, oh, she's just crazy, she's just making it up, it's like, no, we've gone there and we've got the receipts and everything that we need. I should say 1/4 of this, well, let's not overdo it. You see here where my hand is. So what's that about? Let's say 10%. 10% of this book is made up of references, of studies. Studies upon studies upon studies upon studies upon studies. We go in tiny little script, every single one being an evidence to what she's saying, how therapy is not working, how children are getting worse, how, you know, all sorts of things here. So just for that, it's actually worth purchasing the book if you're working in the field and you are looking for some evidence to support this stand against bad therapy. Then, you know, this is the book for you. And I'm glad to see it. I'm glad to see it. I didn't actually bother with that in my book, How I Escaped the Trauma Cult, because I have to admit, look, as far as I'm concerned, psychology is a failed field, and all the studies that have ever been done in psychology are questionable because they didn't take the modern energy chart into consideration. In other words, they didn't take into consideration at the setup of the study, no matter what it was about, what energy states, emotional states the participants of the studies were in. Depending on where they are on the modern energy chart, they're going to give you completely different answers, especially on things as interviews and questionnaires, or even when they have to tick boxes. If they had a bad day, the answers are going to be completely different to what they would have been if that person had woken up bright and fresh and heard their favorite song on the radio on their way into the studio. So the very, very first thing that would have to be done in future psychology studies to make them a bit more useful than a chocolate teapot is to make sure that the people who are taking part in this study are at least similar and documented places on the modern energy chart. Because, how do you feel about yourself? On a bad day, I'm like, oh, I feel terrible. I have terrible self-esteem. I'm old, I'm fat, I'm useless, I'm unsuccessful. Oh my God. Right. And on a good day, you ask me the same question, how do you feel about yourself? Now, I'm blessed, I'm wonderful, I'm doing my life's work. I'm talking to the people of the world about love and understanding emotions. I couldn't have a better life. And this is so for every human being. We need more, oh God. So what we have here is a very good personal, and that's important to me. It's a personal representation of a person who is a mother in today's world with children who are facing this constant onslaught on their mental health and their emotional well-being by misdirecting their attention to trauma. There you go. That'll be my 60-second clip. That's what this is. And it's got the backup of all these research studies that say all the same thing. So you leave kids alone and don't give them any therapy or preventative mental health care, they actually do better if you make them focus on their bad emotions. No shit, Sherlock. Seriously. It's unbelievable that I have to sit here in 2024 and to actually be talking about this. It's ludicrous. It's beyond ludicrous. So, yeah, buy the book. Recommend it to parents and children if you wish, as sort of backup evidence to what I've been saying in the trauma cult. And here we come to, obviously, the problem with the book. And it's not a problem as such, but it is a problem in general. So the reason that I call modern, oh my God, I can't even get this over my tongue, mental health care. It's the opposite of mental health care. Why I called it the trauma cult is because it is a cult. It's a cult that worships trauma, that revolves only around trauma, and there seems to be absolutely no way out. This is what I call the fish tank of insanity. The problem with the trauma cult and the trauma focus is, in essence, that we don't have the positive wing of the SU scale. I'm gonna bring up a SU scale for us to look at. Modern energy chart. It's simple enough. Dum, dum, dum. Yeah, there we go. Here's a little SU scale for us to look at. So this is emotional states from energy body stress to energy body happiness. The problem with the trauma cult is that they have literally taken a pair of evil scissors and cut this off at the 0 point and taken away all the positive emotions. So we are left with nothing but negative emotions or no emotions. And what happens is that person experiences very negative emotions. And what they're trying to do is trying to get rid of the negative emotions somehow, so the person ends up feeling nothing, zero. That's also the basis for medicating the hell out of everybody so that they are just nothing. There is no positive goal there. There is no positive. The whole wing of the positive is missing conceptually from the trauma cult. And once you realize this, you will see this absolutely everywhere. In my book, Revolution, and if you haven't read that yet, please, for the love of God, do. You know, and pass it on, and give it to your friends and your children, give it to everybody. Oh man, in my book, Revolution, I'm pointing out that what happens there is that you're going up to zero, but it never cures anything. It doesn't do anything. And then from zero, the only way is back down again, down, 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 down. And so now we have to try and do something again, more therapy to get back to zero, but it falls back down. And every time that happens, you cycle round and round in this fish tank of insanity here. Fish tank of insanity. And this becomes over time more and more destructive to the human spirit, to the living energy body. And that's the fish tank of insanity. And the people who are stuck inside the trauma cult, and I don't blame them for this. We've been so brainwashed into this from every side, from every angle, from everywhere. They don't see a way out, because the way out, of course, is these positive emotions which are conceptually absent. And I've got some fabulous examples of this here. That's just mind-blowing. This one here is from Jordan Peterson. And I don't know if we can show this, but I will read it out. So, see that there? There, that quote. As you see, it's got a little lightning strike next to it as I was reading it. So, what we see here is self-consciousness, or what Peterson calls self-reflecting on the feeling state, and neurotic suffering are virtually indistinguishable clinically and psychometrically. Insofar as you're thinking about yourself, you're depressed and anxious, Peterson said. There's no difference between thinking about yourself and being depressed and anxious. They are the same thing. And that's an excellent example of this trauma cult business. Perfect example. Thinking about yourself can only mean thinking negative things about yourself. If you believe that, thinking about yourself can only be thinking negative things about yourself, if you believe that, then yeah, well, you're basically, there's no way out. Then the answer is to not think about yourself. That's ridiculous. That's no answer at all. You can't tell human beings not to think about themselves. It's absolutely ludicrous. People need to think. Of course they do. They're thinking people, you know. Think, think, think. That's what makes us so amazing and makes us do such crazy things at the same time. Nobody is thinking in terms of thinking positively about yourself. And before anybody else puts this in the comments, yes, I am aware of so-called positive psychology, but even positive psychology doesn't have the positive wing of the modern energy chart. Of course it doesn't. It's psychology. It's a trauma cult. Yeah, let's be grateful. You don't even know what gratitude at +10 is or what that feels like. God almighty. Look, I give lots of love to all the positive psychology people. This clearly came out of that same realization that our friend Abigail here had, that this trauma thing isn't working. It isn't working, and it's making people worse. I can understand it came out from the same place. Oh dear, we better try and do something positive. But guys, your positive isn't positive enough yet. It can be much more positive, and it can be much easier if you just dropped the trauma cult altogether and just said, no, we're going to stop it with the trauma. We're going to do something else instead. And obviously my solution for that is Star Matrix, which is therapy. Yes, But instead of bad therapy, it's good therapy. So what we're going to do is we're going to put our poor, distraught youngsters, who, as Abigail Shrier points out, are not combat veterans. We're going to put them on a course of memory antibiotics. And those are star memories, the best moments of your life, where you are truly who you were meant to be in the first place. And there, I'm just going to say it, let the hailstones come. Right. So we got gender confused children, and we're not allowed to do any form of conversion therapy or challenge their opinions. Cool. We don't have to. With Star Matrix, we can just ask these children about the very best moments of their lives and help them discover who they really are. That is safe. It is entirely based on the children's own lived experience, and from this kind of stabilization point of starting to understand who you are, that raises energy, it de-stresses the person, it stabilizes the energy body, it makes it easy for the therapist to be extremely supportive and loving towards that person. It solves so many problems. And it doesn't convert the child into anything that the child isn't. And what you're going to find if you do star therapy with youngsters, say, what, 8 onwards or 5 onwards if you want. Ask them what they love to do, what they remember, special times that they had, special moments where they were really, really happy. This builds new train tracks in the brain, and the child can start to get a sense of who they are in this incarnation. And that is not conversion. That is a form of affirmation. That is not affirming some crazy, stressed notions or weird, bizarre ideas that were implanted from some groomer on the internet, but instead who they are, their lived experience up to this point, and that is going to stabilize that child. Then we can discuss whether it needs any further therapy after that. So yeah, as you can tell, this has I have very much enjoyed reading this book. I found the perspective of the modern parent and the problems that they're having extremely moving, extremely interesting. I already knew that this therapy thing is a bad idea. I've known this since 1993, really. So I am really glad that there's a huge team behind this lady who is marketing this book. There'll be lots and lots of talk about this and lots of furore about this. And that's good, because we really need to talk about bad therapy and how parents can stand up to this bullshit and take this back and stop trying to be bad therapists to their own children and ruining their own lives and the relationships with their children in the process. So, yeah, good book, important book. I'm glad it's there. And more people, once they realize, this isn't working, they'll hopefully look for something else. And gladly, I've worked on this for the last 30 years. So I have a set of sound, workable, logical, practical solutions. And I've also been a mother, and I can tell you that to not have people put labels on your children is a really good idea. So with that, yeah, thank you very much, Abigail Shrier. I appreciate the work you and your team has done, and I'm hoping that a little bit of modern energy, a little bit of modern stress management, better understanding of emotions, that more people will finally break out of the fish tank of insanity and will leave bad therapy behind once and for all. With all my love, and See you on Sunday for next part of how I escaped the trauma code. Lots of love and bye for now. Apparently every day is a good day when you're not in a cult. 30 years ago, I was cancelled for finding out something during my research that was forbidden science. I have, however, continued to research, and I would like to offer you the opportunity to see what I've come up with in the last 30 years. It's not a very big book, as you can see, and it's got lots and lots of pictures in it. And you can download it for free right now at goe.ac/revolution. You can also support me and my work and this channel by buying a hard copy from Amazon. So yeah, find out for yourself, make up your own mind. I believe in you and your intelligence.